Hello, you my lovelies. We're going to have another ramble at you again, mostly about disappointment and dead kings this time. See, I've been at the old historical novelettas again. This time, if I can get it the right way round, you'll have to forgive me if this is once again a bit rough and ready, as I'm still filming on La Donna Mobile and I've not managed to sort out any sort of editing software, so you're pretty much going to get this as it comes. So it might not be the most polished. But yes, I've been reading The White Rose Murders by Martin Clines, nom de plume of P.C. Doherty, who is, once again, one of my favourite historical authors, historical fiction, I might point out, although he's very knowledgeable on the subject. Now, this is a Tudor novel, so obviously I'm going to talk to you about largely kings who aren't the Tudors. The main focus of this is about Richard III. Now, my feelings are very mixed about the current uh, current monarchy, the Windsors, but I do have a real interest in the sort of kings and queens of the past, back when monarchy actually ruled, when they actually did something, when they were more important in the way that life and the country functioned. Once again, this largely comes back to Richard III, who is quite a large figure. He's Shakespeare's great villain, the crook-backed scheming monarch. Played to great effect by Laurence Olivier. The great "This is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by that something son of York." That's terrible reading, but it is what it is. He's the great usurper, the last of the Plantagenets, and as he's most commonly known these days, the king in the car park, because we did find his remains while digging up a car park. Which is fair, that was the name of the documentary they made about him, or made about finding his bones, but I just think it lacks a certain gravitas considering the size of the character that he was. Well, not a character as in he was a large character, larger than life in many ways. Even not like a character in a book, he definitely wasn't fictional. I have to say, I don't really care for the sort of burial slab they've made for him. If you've ever seen it, I've not managed how to put images into these things yet. But while a lot of them you see a sort of idealised sleeping figure on top of the tomb, for Richard, we've just sort of got a not quite rectangular slab with a huge cross bisecting it. Which, yeah, taste's a personal thing when it comes to art. For me, it's a very, very blocky and brutalist, which isn't normally to my taste. But as often, I'm getting off track. This book mentions Richard in retrospect. It's talking, well, it's set during the reign of Henry VIII, of young Henry VIII, Bluff King Hal, as the protagonist calls him, and he's none too fond of him, at least in retrospect. But it does mention the fact that they go to the Blue Boar Tavern, or the Blue Boar Inn, near Bosworth, where Richard met his fate. It also mentions a wee bit of apocrypha that apparently, as he was moving through the place, he knocked his leg against a bridge, and there was some sort of wise woman or witch is said to have sort of prophesied that he would strike his head against it not long after, and apparently he did. When his corpse was carried over, it slung over the back of the donkey. Whether that's true, I don't think we'll ever know. But once again, it's just a little bit more lore for Richard, for want of a better word. Now, the thing is, the Blue Boar Tavern used to be called the White Boar Tavern. The White Boar being Richard's personal insignia, his sort of, not even a family crest, a personal crest. And his followers, people who were a big fan of King Richard, would wear the White Boar very proudly, and presumably got rid of it not long after his death. In fact, the White Boar Tavern was changed to the Blue Boar not long after his death, so they could sort of avoid the perceived wrath of the new Tudor dynasty who are now in power. You see, this is the problem. I read about the White Boar, now the Blue Boar, and I got it into my tiny little mind that I was going to plan myself a little trip. I was going to visit this edifice, this place that had stood since then. I was going to, make myself a little train ride or hop on a bus, a little hat on, nice little satchel with some bits in, and have a foaming pint of ale under the same roof where Richard is said to have, maybe had his last pint of ale in this world before he went to Bosworth and met his Waterloo. It's a nice idea, and I got quite worked up about it, rather foolishly, before I'd looked into the details. The problem is, the tiny little problem with my plan is, I knew there was a chance that it was going to be under different ownership. It was either going to be turned into some hideous day-glow orange wine bar that sold overpriced cocktails. It wasn't going to be, the same sort of wattle and daub place with a fire as in Richard's day. But I thought, given the history, they might have leaned into it. And so, well, the historical connection, we've got to capitalise on that. So we'll keep this place going. It could also have been turned into something else, flats or something, but I could have leased it visited. And that's where the problem is. See, the Blue Boar Tavern was demolished. It was demolished in 1836. Now, I have been fashionably late to some lovely parties in my time. I've seen one or two of you at a couple of little wine and cheese soirees, and I can't say I've cut the most dashing figure, but I've arrived early enough for it to be in effect. But nearly 3 centuries, 290 years, I can't even blame modern society and a lack of understanding of the history of the place because it was so long ago. And I'm furious with myself. I'm not even furious at them because it was so long ago. I'm furious with myself because I got all worked up with planning pointless little details of how I was going to find the Blue Boar and get to the Blue Boar without first checking if it still existed. So that's entirely my fault. I've got massively off track once again, and hopefully I'll speak to you about my usual nonsense at some time soon. Cheers, kids.